This is the second part of a video tutorial for Philosophy 123, Module 4 on Pascal's wager. Now, as I was saying in the previous video tutorial, the logic behind Pascal's wager, the rationale behind Pascal's wager, points out the fact that if you believe that God exists and you're right, there's an infinitely good payoff. Whereas for all other options, if you believe in God and you're wrong, if you don't believe in God at all, there's at best a finite benefit that one gains, perhaps a finite cost that one risks. Okay, so remember though, this is supposed to be a decision under risk when we're talking about whether or not God exists. A decision under risk occurs when we don't know the probabilities of the various outcomes. How likely is it, how probable is it that God exists? 50% likely, 20% likely, 90% likely? If there's anyone who has to say that this is a case of a decision under risk, it's Pascal. Remember, Pascal says reason is of no help here. If there's anyone who has to say we don't know how likely it is that God exists, it's a fideist like Pascal. Okay, so what do we do when we're faced with a decision under risk? Well, here's the most common strategy suggested by decision theorists. Okay, and this isn't in the reading, so this is hopefully going to be helpful. The idea is when you're making a decision under risk, what you should try to do is make the worst case scenario as good as it possibly can be. Pick the option that has the best worst case scenario. Let me say that again. When you're making a decision under risk, according to decision theorists, it's a very common assumption among decision theorists, what we should do is choose the option that has the best worst case scenario. So even if things go terribly, terribly wrong and you wind up in the worst case scenario, you're still better off than you would be if you had gotten the worst option in resulting from some other choice. This is sometimes called the maximum principle. You should maximize your minimum. Make your worst case scenario as good as it should possibly be. The maximum principle. Pick the option that has the best worst case scenario. Well, take a look at Pascal's wager. What option has the best worst case scenario? It's the one in which we believe in God. It's not only got the highest payoff, right, but you don't risk, say, hell or damnation or anything like that. So no kidding, according to Pascal's wager, the rational thing to do is to believe that God exists. Okay? Wager that he is. Now, you might point out that, look, all Pascal has given us here is an argument that we should believe that God exists. It's not a proof argument. It's completely consistent with Pascal's wager that God, in fact, doesn't exist. True. Nonetheless, Pascal thinks, even though we don't have enough evidence to know, even though reason is of no help here, the rational thing to do is to be a theist, and in particular for Pascal, to be a Christian. Second problematic thing to say for Pascal. It's one thing to say that the rational thing to do is to believe that God exists, but lots of things might be rational for me to do, and I can't just make them happen. Okay? It might be rational for me to believe. Suppose you would offer me $1 billion if I could simply believe that a triangle has 4 sides. That's harder than it sounds, isn't it? Because I happen to believe that a triangle has 3 sides and that that's a necessary condition for something to be a triangle. No matter how good the financial incentives are, I can't simply believe something at will. Not in this case, anyway. Pascal acknowledges this. Essentially, his advice is that you should fake it until you make it. He suggests that you hang out with other Christians, like-minded believers. You should do what they do, practice their rituals, read and sing, and do the things that they read and sing, and so on. And he thinks eventually faith will find you. No kidding. Fake it till you make it. Even if you currently don't have faith, you should do whatever it takes to get faith, because that's the rational thing to do. That is Pascal's wager.